Masechet Ketubot Daf Yod. We're going to start off with an important discussion about whether a ketubah and the amount that's paid is a deoraita law or a derabanan law. And then we're going to see a few interesting stories about people who had a claim that they did not find bitulim and the way various rabbis handled it to make shalom bayit. And then we're going to see the next Mishnah. There's going to be a bunch of agadot and etymologies thrown in the middle as well. So we begin Tana ho'ilu knas chachamim hu lo tigbe ela min haziburit. So the Braita says, because the payment of the ketubah is a fine that was instituted by the sages, therefore she can collect only from inferior quality land. So the background to this is that if there's a Torah law, the Torah says this person has to pay someone for damages or whatever it is. If the Torah demands it, then the person collecting can choose whichever type of land that they want, including the highest quality land. Now, of course, there's going to be a certain value. If the person owes a fine of $1,000, so it'll be either a smaller portion of high quality land or a larger portion of low quality land. So it's still the same amount. Nevertheless, most people would prefer a smaller portion of something that's high quality than the other way around. Like, you go to a fancy restaurant, you prefer that to have a small portion of very good food than a lot of bad food. Good. So here, because the ketubah is not a doraita payment, but rather a fine legislated by the sages, therefore she can collect only from the inferior quality. That's whatever he wants to give her, for even from the lowest land. So now we ask a question on the Braita. Kenasa? My kenasa? A penalty? Why are you calling this a penalty? It's not like someone does something wrong. This is a contractual payment upon the end of a marriage. So rather, change that word, not a fine, but rather a ordinance of the rabbis that they said every man should not be married unless he promises a ketubah. Therefore, since it's only rabbinic law, it can be paid with inferior quality land. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel omer ketubat isha mina Torah. However, Rashbag argues on Tanakama and says, in fact, it is a Torah law. So let's see the sources. Umi amar Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel hachi. Hold on. Did Rashbag really say it's a Doraita law? We have a second Braita that says the opposite. V'hatanya kesef yishkol kemohad habetulot. This pasuk in Sefer Shemot is talking about a man who seduces a na'ara, a young girl, and this is similar to rape. He would either have to marry her, or if the father refuses, he has to pay the mohad of betulot, the dowry that usually a virgin would get, because now that he has stopped that. He has broken her bitulim, so now she is not going to be able to receive that value when she does get married. So therefore, this seducer has to pay of that value. What we see from here is that there is such a thing as a mohad betulah, that a betulah gets a certain standard amount. That's why he has to pay for it. So we see that this amount is a deoraita law. Now, in this law in Sefer Shemot, it doesn't say how much it is. However, there is a parallel law in Sefer Devarim where a man rapes a na'ara betula, and here it says that he has to give la'aviha na'ara 50 kasef. So there you go. It's 50 shekels of silver that he has to give. And so now the Gemara will say that the amount that's given to betula is the same as the amount in the ketubah, and vice versa. This is what the rabbis based themselves on when they established the ketubah for a woman from the Torah. Sounds like while the Torah says that there is a mohad, there's a standard amount that one would have to give, and gives some estimate of that, gives a value. It's the rabbis that translate that value into their own currency and say that the appropriate amount is 200 zuz. So according to this, it seems like it's pretty much a deoraita law, according to Tanakama, even though it uses the word samchu, which in other contexts means an asmachta, something that's a rabbinic law, but they just find a mnemonic or want to try to bring some sense of authority to their Drabanan law by associating it with a pasuk. But in this case, it seems to be stronger because it does say min ha-Torah, that the idea that a betulah should be given a certain amount is from the Torah, and then the exact amount is what the rabbis are basing themselves on and deriving from the law. That's Tanakama. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel omer Ketubot isha ena midivrei Torah ela midivrei sofrim. Rashbag says no, it's not from the Torah, but rather it's rabbinic. So the whole thing is rabbinic. So therefore we have a contradiction. Rashbag over here said it's from the Torah, and here he says it's midrabanan. So we answer, ipuch, you know what? Take the second baraita and reverse it. What Tanakama says, that's actually what Rashbag says. He says it's from the Torah. And the Tanakama is what the Rashbag is what the Tanakama says, and Tanakama is what Rashbag says. That's only Divrei Sofrim. All right, that's good. That will answer the question. But then we ask, why are you choosing to reverse the opinions in this baraita? Why not reverse the opinions in the first baraita and say that Rashbag is the one that says it's D'Rabbanan, and therefore he only has to give her the inferior quality? And that would also answer the question. So we answer, Shamina led Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel damar Ketubot isha mid deoraita. No, we have another source that we are basing, a third source that says that according to Rashbag, in fact, the ketubah is mid deoraita. So that's why we want to go with the first one that Rashbag says deoraita and switch the second one. Okay, what is the third source? It's a Mishnah. Later on Daf Kof Yod, Ditanan Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer Noten la me'ot kepotkiya, that when a man pays the ketubah, he should pay her using the currency of Kapotkiya, an important city. So the currency there was well known and well established and accepted everywhere. That shows it's a Torah law, because if you have to pay something according to Torah law, then you have to use the best currency and not some local little currency that won't be accepted everywhere. Like nowadays, you'd have to pay in dollars that's accepted everywhere, and not in Bitcoin that's going to change value from the time that you pay till the next minute. Okay, so therefore we see Rabban Gamliel, in fact, Rashbag, in fact, has to be the one that says it's deoraita. V'iba'et ema kula Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel hi v'chasura mechasera v'chikatane. Another way of resolving the problem, instead of swapping the opinions in the second braita, is rather to say that this braita is missing words, and we have to fill in the words. But in fact, the whole thing is the opinion of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel as follows. Here's how you read it. Mikan samchu chachamim lechutubat isha min haTorah. And so everyone agrees that a ketubah of a woman is from the Torah if she's a betula. Ketubat almana ena midivrei Torah ela midivrei sofrim. The machloket is only regarding an almana. She, from the Torah, does not deserve any amount. And that's the rabbis that said, you know what, an almana, even though it's a second marriage, we want to make sure that the husbands treat them nicely. And so let her get, she also should have an amount that he has to pay, even if it's a lesser amount. She Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel omer Ketubot almana ena midivrei Torah ela midivrei sofrim. And after all, it was Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel said about this explicitly, that the ketubah for an almana is not from Torah, but rather only midivrei sofrim. So by adding these words and showing the beginning is the same, that this quotes the pasuk and says this is like more betulot is like this. That's all talking about for a betulah. It says mohara betulot. That makes sense. And then it goes on and says, yeah, that's true for betulah, but for an almana it's different. And in that sense, this is really asmachta. And Rashbag says, in fact, yes, it's only midivrei sofrim. Okay, so we established the two opinions about a ketubah, and now we'll see some stories. Hahuda talakamed Rav Nachman Nachman Amar le petach patuach masati. A certain groom came after his wedding night, and he comes to Rab Nachman and said, we consummated the marriage, but I found an open passageway. She is not a betula, so, I want my money back. Amar le Rab Nachman, asbuhu kufre mebarachta habita le. Rab Nachman said a surprising answer. He told his guards there that they should flog him with lulavim, with palm branches, because how does he know that this passageway is open? He must have experience. Well, where did he get this experience from to know the difference between an open and a closed passageway? It must be from the zonot, from the prostitutes that were around this area called Mevarachta. Maybe that was like the red light district in their town of Mechoza. So therefore, instead of this poor groom, he thought he's going to come in and make a claim and get his money, and instead he gets flogged for revealing that he must have been sleeping around in prohibited ways. Hold on, how come Rav Nachman hit him? Rav Nachman also said that we believe him. We trust, if he makes that claim, we trust him, and that would create a prohibition, and also he wouldn't have to pay the 200 zuz. So yes, it's both. We do believe him, and so we enter his claim, and in fact, he won't have to pay the money, but since by saying this, he also reveals that he must have behaved badly beforehand, he deserves these lashes. Okay, being flogged with a lulav, I don't know, it doesn't sound so painful, but I guess it could be. Lulavim could be very sharp, and especially on bare skin. So he gets both the punishment, and even though he is believed, because he's believed, that's why he gets flogged. Ravacha mishaneh kan bebachur kan benasui. Ravacha says no, I can reconcile it differently. It depends on the case. If it's a bachur, if it's a young man, a bachelor who was not married before, and then you say, well, how do you know the difference of what it feels like if it's an open passageway or not? It must be he was with zonot, so that guy gets flogged. But if a person who was married already, so that's how he knows he has experience from his previous marriage, which was permitted. So he doesn't deserve to be flogged. That person is believed, and his claim is authenticated. Okay. So now a story way back for Tana Rabban Gamliel, and the groom said, didn't find betulim, I found an open passageway. Amar le shema hitita. Rabban Gamliel says, maybe you diverted, you used that technique that people knew in Eretz Yisrael, and they're able to go past the betulim without breaking them, and that's why you didn't see blood. Rabban Gamliel says, I'll give you a parable. You know what it's like? Like a man who's walking in the night. Can't see where he's going. This is similar that during Bi'ah, he doesn't know, he doesn't see. Hita misa'o patuach lo hita misa'o na'ul. So if you imagine a door that's propped open a little bit. So if he goes in and goes to the side, then he'll find that there's an open passageway, because he can just scooch in the open part of the side of the door. But if he does not, if he tries to go straight, then he'll bang into the door, because the door does have is stopped midway, halfway open. So if he goes straight, then he'll find that he can't go through. It's locked, and it gets dark, so he can't see that there's an opening on the side. He just says, "Oh, I guess it's closed. I guess it's locked." So that's why he says, maybe in fact she is a betula. You just went towards the side. Maybe either he knew what he was doing, he had known this technique, or maybe by mistake he happened to go that way, and that's why he did not find betulim. What you see is that Rabban Gamliel is trying to make shalom bayit, right? Trying to find a way that the man's claim will not be true, so that they can stay together. Another version of Rabban Gamliel's answer. He didn't say that maybe by mistake, not knowingly, you found out a way, you figured out how to go on the side, but rather the opposite. Maybe purposely, intentionally, you use so much force that you knocked down the door and broke the bolt. So again, there's a door here that was partially blocking the entryway, and it's dark, so you can't see. And if a person walks with a lot of force, then they'll just push the door right open without even noticing that actually it was locked. There was a bolt there. Because he uses so much force. So, that was already mashal, but now he says it again explicitly. It's similar to a person who's walking at night in darkness. If purposely he diverts, here the word diverts has to mean that he used a lot of force, and then he'll find that it's open, right? If he just rams his way through the door, see, the door was open. Just it flies right open. Whereas if he doesn't, then he'll say, I guess locked. Look, I can't go. He'll realize that there was something stopping the door. So the same thing here is telling the groom, maybe you used so much force that you didn't even realize that you had in fact broken her bitulim. But in fact, she had bitulim, and so he dismissed his claim. Another case that someone came before Rabban Gamliel. This is the son of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. So this would be the great grandson of the Rabban Gamliel that we just were talking about. He says, we had bi'ah after the marriage, and I did not find blood. But she is there also this time, and she says, I am a betulah. I was a betulah. I'm still a betulah. He didn't consummate the marriage. He didn't finish. He didn't fully penetrate. So I'm still a betulah. Amar lehem habi'u li oto sudar. So Rabban Gamliel says, I want you to bring me the bed sheet. Let's check it out. Let's see what we can find. Habi'u lo sudar shabamayim. So they brought the bed sheet. Obviously, there was not a lot of blood on it. Otherwise, it would have been obvious. So it looked like it was white. But Rabban Gamliel, he knew he had a trick, and he soaked the sheet in water, and he washed it. Umasa alav kamati pedam, and he was able to find some drops of blood. I guess that the man's semen as white covered up the blood, and therefore that's why they couldn't see it. But when he laundered it, the blood stained more than the white, and therefore he was able to say, see, there is a little blood here. So then he told the man, right, Mabruk, go and merit with your acquisition. It's acquisition because he did Kiddushin, he acquired her as his wife, and so now she is permitted to him because, in fact, she was a betulah, and it proved he couldn't, it was only a little bit of blood, so he didn't see. Okay, good. So he made shalom bayit. Amala huna mor bered rava mipar zakya l'rav Asher. Ana nami na'abed hachi. So this huna who lives in Bavel said, that's a good idea. I want to do the same trick. And so he also wanted to try it with a groom that came, and there was no blood. Bring the sheet. So let's launder it and see if we could find that there was a little blood there. In fact, Amaleh gihuch shelanu kikibus shelahem. However, Rav Asher said to him, no, we don't know how to do this trick because our gihutz in modern Hebrew means ironing, but back then it meant a special type of laundering that you'd bring a stone and rub it a lot to get all the stains out. So that what we do as gihutz, that's equivalent to laundering in Eretz Yisrael. But the problem is, if we do gihutz, our gihutz is so strong with the stone that you'll end up removing not only anything that's white, the stain of a semen, but also the blood. In other words, in Eretz Yisrael, they seem to have other types of water or detergent that was able to remove the zera, but it would leave the blood there as well. Whereas in Bavel, since they did not have that type of detergent that was that could do that, their gihutz, their high level of laundering, was so strong that we're using that rock and rubbing it out, it would rub out the blood also, and therefore they didn't know the system of laundering that they had in Israel, so they could not replicate this technique in Bavel. Okay, another story. The same sage, Rabban Gamliel, the son of Rabbi. Again, he says, we had bi'ah, consummated the marriage, did not find blood. However, the bride says, I am a betula still. So Rabban Gamliel says, I'm going to do a test. He was very innovative. And he says, so bring me 2 maidservants. One, someone you know is still a betula, and the other one who you know is not, is a be'ula. So they brought these 2 people, and they had them sit. He had them sit on a barrel of wine. Be'ula rechanodef, betula and rechanodef. The one who was be'ula, who was already had relations with the man, she, you could smell, they smelled her breath, and you could smell the scent of the wine. The idea is that they thought of the body as a kind of tube, an open tube, and therefore, the smell of the wine, since it was an open passageway, was able to enter straight through, and you could smell it from her mouth. That shows that she is a be'ula. Whereas the betula, since her passageway is closed up, that would block the scent of the wine from going up. Afzo Hoshiba. Once he did that with the 2 maidservants, he said, look, see, this system works. So then he told the bride, come and you sit. And they did not smell any wine on her breath. See, there's a proof that she is a betula. Rabban Gamliel told the groom, and therefore he says, go and merit and take your possession. All right, so this system is based on Greco-Roman science, and people have investigated the way that these types of gynecological tests were done by the Greeks as well, and so this was in a way the science of the time, but I wouldn't try this at home. So now we have a question. Rabban Gamliel, why didn't you check her initially, the bride? How come he brought those the 2 maidservants to try it out first, and only then bring the bride? So the answer is Gemara hava shemi'aleh ma'aseh lo hava hazeh. Rabban Gamliel heard that this is a technique that people do, that can be done. Maybe he heard that there's some doctors, Roman doctors that do this, but he never did it himself. And so it's a special technique. You have to know exactly how much wine, how do you do it, right? How much time do you have to wait? So even because he never did it himself, he wanted to experiment first, and with a standard case that he knew for sure that one was a be'ula, one was a betula. He says, maybe I'm not sufficiently an expert in the matter, and it's not nice to demean Jewish women by testing her out. Here, sit on this barrel. It's the demeaning thing to do. So he didn't want to do it for no reason and just have her sit, and it's not even going to work. So that's why he tested out and perfected his technique with the 2 maidservants, and then once he knew and showed that it works, then he was able to do it with others. All right. You wonder if maybe even Rabban Gamliel knew that this science is a little sketchy, but he wanted to make shalom bayit. So he says, okay, bring these. See, it works. Okay, shalom al Yisrael. Go home and have a happy marriage. Now going back to Rabban Gamliel the elder, who was all the way back from the time of the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash. And the groom said, Amar lo Rabbi, ba'alti v'lo masati dam. I didn't find blood. Amar lo Rabbi, mimishpachat dor deki ana. So she said, listen, it's true he didn't find blood, but it's not my fault. I am from this family of dor keti, and we have this physiological anomaly that we don't have menstrual blood, and we don't have blood of betulim. That we just they didn't have it. So Badak Rabban Gamliel checked, so they knew this is some type of genetic disease, and checked her relatives and said it's true. This family does not have blood, and therefore she is a betula, even though she didn't bleed. Amar lo lech zekeh b'mikachacha. She was never with another man, and the fact that she didn't have blood is because of her condition. And so he told the groom, go and merit with what your acquisition. Ashrecha shezachita mishpachat dor keti. And not only that, he gave him a blessing, right? Happy, privileged are you that you merited to marry into this family. I guess the idea is that she'll never become a nida, so you don't have to worry about that. Okay. Right, because if she was a be'ula, then you'd have the problem. Maybe she was unfaithful under him, then they can't stay together. So now he said, no, you don't have to worry about them. Now let's analyze this family a little more. My dor keti, dor katua. Why were they called dor keti? It might have just been their family name, but we're going to see a bunch of folk etymologies. So it means dor katua, generation that is cut off, because they could not have children. Makes sense. If they didn't menstruate, then they probably were not fertile. So for that reason, Rabbi Chanina said, when Rabban Gamliel said nice words to him and consoled him, he says, oh, go and marry, you're so lucky you married into this family. This was empty consolation. Kachtamim yafim la'isha. La'isa and isha. This is nice play on words and a rhyme. So Rabbi Chia said, just like leaven is good for dough, leaven, even if it seems like it's technically decaying, but you need that. You want leaven to make a nice dough. So too blood, which is not a very pleasant thing, but it's good. It shows that the woman is fertile, just like the dough will rise and be nice. So too, woman, the fact that she sees blood shows that she is healthy and will have children. Isha. Good. Ve'tana mishum Rabbi Meir kol isha shedameha mirubin baneha mirubin. Similarly, Rabbi Meir says a woman who has a lot of blood in her during her nida, that shows that she will have a lot of children. So actually, this is not a blessing to be married to this family. It's the opposite. It means they're not going to be able to have children. Itmar Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba Amar Zeche b'mikacha Amar le, Rabbi Yosef bar Rabin Amar Nitchaye b'mikacha Amar le. And in fact, there's two different versions of the story when Rabban Gamliel said, "Go and merit with your acquisition." And go and have a good marriage. So one version said, yes, as we saw before, you're privileged with your acquisition. But another version says, nitchayev, now you are liable because of your acquisition. Sorry, Charlie, you acquired her. She is legally married to you, and now she did not cheat on you. She is in fact a bitula, so you're stuck with her. I mean, he can divorce her, but he has to pay the ketubah of a bitulim. So this was a negative. So the one who says, sorry, you are liable because of your acquisition, that would make sense because of what Rabbi Hanina said, that this is consolation, empty consolation, because she can't have children. But the one who said it's meritorious, what is the merit here? And the answer is, he doesn't have to worry, like most people do, that perhaps she's nida. Sometimes a woman may stain, and what is this? Is this blood? Is it something else? Is she nida? Is she not? And they don't know. But if one is married to someone from this family, then they don't have to worry about that at all, because they never bleed, and that is all good. This is interesting because it is relevant. There is a type of contraceptive pill where a women don't get their periods at all, and a lot of discussion about, is that healthy? Is it psychologically, the hormones? Is it good to go through cycles? Halachically, is this good to have a cycle of being together and then apart and renew it together? So here's a precedent, whichever way you're going to say. This is a precedent of this family. We could learn from them about this modern medical advance. Okay. Another case, someone came to the Yehuda Nasi and he said, I didn't see blood. But she said, no, I am still a bitula. Now, by the way, it's not clear if she says this or the Gemara happens to be noting that this was a time of drought. And so people were not able to eat and drink, and were not healthy. Rabbi saw that their faces were black. When someone is very, very hungry, their skin darkens. So Rabbi told his attendants, let's go pamper them a little, bring them into the bathhouse. And he gave them food and drink. And then he said, okay, go and you can be together in this room. And after that, they had bi'ah, and he did find blood. Rabbi said, go, see, she was a betula all along, and go and merit with your acquisition, and live happily ever after. The point is that she didn't see, the reason she didn't see blood because they were so gaunt and unhealthy that the body was not functioning properly. But once they ate and drank and were able to be healthy, so therefore her blood vessels and her tissues and everything went back to full health, and so then she was able to see blood. Kari Rabbi alehem safad oram al asmam yavesh haya ka'etz. And Rabbi says, see the pasuk in Echa, that their skin shriveled on their bones has become like a stick. Right, when someone is very hungry, then they actually shrivel up and like they have no bones. It's just like a stick and dry, and therefore that's why she wasn't bleeding. Most people say that she's the one that needed to become healthy in order to bleed. I think it could also be him. Maybe he didn't have the strength to be able to perform bi'ah properly, fully, in order to break the bitulim. All right, so fantastic stories of rabbis, but you see in every single story the rabbis are trying to find a way that the couple can stay together and show that even though he thinks that she's not a betula, in fact she is. Betula ketubata matayim b'almana maneh. So follow up, we saw the first Mishnah said betula niset yom revi'i v'almana yom chamishi. And the rest of the Mishnah, as we noted before, was as an added layer of commentary on the Mishnah. But the original layer of the Mishnah just said Betula is married on Wednesday, Almanah on Thursday. And so these lines would be the direct continuation. Betula gets 200, Almanah gets only 100 zuz. So the flow makes sense. The second contrast between the Betula and Almanah. Betula almana girusha v'chalusa mina erusin ketubatan matayim v'yesh lehen tanat betulim. If you have a betula, she was never married before, and her fiance dies. Or they get divorced. Once you do kiddushin, if they want to separate, he has to give her a get. Or if he died and she had to do yibum, but didn't do yibum, did chalitza with the brother-in-law. There is a mitzvah of yibum or chalitza even after kiddushin before nisuin. And all these cases, because there was only kiddushin and not nisuin, we assume that they did not have bi'ah together. Therefore, she is still a betula. So when she gets married for a second time, after being widowed or divorced, then she deserves 200 zuz again. So even though someone did kiddushin with her as a betula and her husband died or divorced, she is still a betula and gets 200 zuz. And if that second time around the man comes and says, I didn't find any blood, then he can make a claim, she's that he doesn't have to pay, same as the cases before. Now we're going to go into some etymologies. My almana. How come almana means a widow? Amar Rav Hana Bagdata'a almana al shem maneh. The word almana, you see, has the word maneh in it. So almaneh, the one who gets 100. So this is a folk etymology. It's not really the derivation of the word because it appears in the Torah even before there was 100 zuz that was given to an almanah by the rabbis. So almanah min erusin ma'ikalemema. So now we ask, hold on, not every almanah gets 100. When Mishnah just said that if a woman is widowed, but she only had kiddushin, not nisuin, then she is still a betula, and you can have a widow that gets 200. Aididaha karila almana, hanami karila almana. Now the answer is since the one who is widowed after marriage is called an almana, and that's most of the cases. So we just call a widow after kiddushin before nisuin also almana, even though she gets 200, but most widows get 100. Almana de ketiba beoraita make almema. Okay, what are you going to do with the word almana? It's in the Torah itself. So you see that the derivation is not from 100 zuz, which is only rabbinic innovation. Oh, the Torah is anticipating what the rabbis are going to say, which is kind of curious. So it is in the Torah, but it's only the Rabbanan, because the Torah is already hinting to something that the rabbis are going to say later. Okay, mikatav kira la'atid. So the Gemara says, how does this work? And does the Torah have in it things that didn't happen yet, and it's hinting to future things that are not currently true? In fact, when Torah is describing Gan Eden and its location, he says between these 4 rivers, and the third river is the Tigris River, Hidekel, and it goes east of Ashur. Now, Ashur is the name of a place. What is this place? V'tana Rav Yosef, Ashur zo Sileka. This is Seleucia. This is a city that did not exist at the time of the Torah. Umi Havai was Ashur, was Selika around at the time of the creation of the world, back in the time of Gan Eden? It was not. Rather, the Torah knew that in the future there will be a people that will come and settle this land, and they'll call it Seleucia. So the Torah does predict the future, and so too here, even though the rabbis did not say that an almana gets 100, already the Torah hints to it by calling her almana. Okay, very nice. Amar Rav Hana Bagdata'a. The same sage, since we quoted him once, and something relevant to the Mishnah, now we're going to quote a few more things that he said. Matar mashke marve mzabel me'aden umamshich. When you have rain, rain does a lot of good things. It irrigates, saturates, and fertilizes the land, and refines the fruit, and makes it proliferate. Does all these things. Amar Rava bar Rabbi Ishmael v'itema Rav Yamar bar Shelemya. Maikera. How do we know this from the pasuk? Because it says in Tehillim, Telameha Rave nachet gedudeha berbibim temogegena simcha tebarech. So each phrase here refers to something else that the rain does. The first phrase, watering ridges abundantly, and that's referring to the irrigation and saturation of the land. Then bibim temogegena, that you make it soft with showers, that's talking about fertilizing. And simchat tebarech, you bless its growth, that's talking about the blessing and proliferating the fruit that it produces. Okay, Amar Rabbi El-Azar, another kind of mnemonic of something that does helps in many ways. Mizbeach, meziach, umezin, mechabeb, mechaper. Mizbeach, an altar where you make sacrifices, is called that not just because it has from the word zevach, that's the peshat. Zevach means something that you slaughter. You take a slaughtered animal, you put it on the mizbeach. But Rabbi Elazar makes it a rasha and says each letter of the word mizbeach points to something that the mizbeach does. One is meziach, it moves sins away. Zayin is mezin, it sustains life because now that we have merit, so we get rain and we get sustenance. The bet is mechabeb, it makes us beloved to our Creator, and the het is mechaper. Okay, it's not an exact match, but it's close enough that it also atones for our sins. We ask, hainu mechaper, hainu meziach. Hold on, isn't atoning the same as pushing away the sins? Answer is a little different. Meziach gezerot mechaper avonot. Meziach, pushing away, is referring to the decrees, the evil decrees that are upon us. The korban will push away, whereas mechaper is actually atones for the sin itself. Amar Rav Hana Bagdata, our friend from Baghdad, has another piece of his health advice. Tamre Meshahanan, Mesabe'an, Meshalshelan, Me'asheran, Vela Mafkenan. Eating dates has all these benefits. They warm a person from the inside and they satiate a person. Shilshul in modern Hebrew is not very good, but they mean here it's a laxative. When you need it, it loosens up one's insides, and they they strengthen but do not pamper a person. In other words, even though this is kind of a luxury item, and sometimes if someone eats something that's very luxurious, then they become dependent on it, and they become addicted to it, and now they're pampered. Even though it's good for you and it's strengthening and it's delightful, but you won't get addicted and pampered by it. So it's just all good all around. Amarav achal temarim al yoreh. Rav, however, says something negative. If you eat dates, you should not issue halachic ruling that they are actually intoxicating. And so you become lightheaded and can't think straight. So we have a challenge to Rav. Why are you saying it's negative? Look at all these positive things that Braita says. Temarim shacharit v'arbit yafot. If you eat dates in the morning, evening is good for you. B'mincha ra'ot. In the afternoon, it's not good for you. That's true. B'saorayim en kemotan. But in the middle of the day, nothing better than that. And they can take away three negative things. A troubling thought, or intestinal illness, or hemorrhoids. Eat some dates during these at noon, and you'll feel great. So that's a challenge. How come Rav, you said that you shouldn't issue a halachic ruling when dates are so good in all these ways? No, the Rav didn't say that they're not good. They actually are very good for your health. It's just that for a short time they cause a person to be intoxicated. So they are healthful, but your mind is not going to be thinking 100%. So just refrain from giving a halachic ruling about an important topic during that time. Same as wine. If you drink a cup full of wine, a person should not issue halachic rulings. Not that wine is bad; they often drank wine, but it's just you're not at your full capacity, mental capacity. Or another way to answer it is if you eat the dates before eating bread, then they're going to go to your head and become intoxicating. But if you eat it with a meal, after a meal, have the bread first and then eat the dates as a dessert, then they won't not become intoxicating. Similar to wine on an empty stomach versus after a meal. My mother told me that dates before eating bread are not good for you, like axe to a palm tree. But after eating bread, they're beneficial, like bolts to a door that will provide some good support. Now that we mentioned the word door in Aramaic, which is dasha, we're going to find an etymology for that also. Marava derech sham. The word dasha is an acronym for a passageway is there. A door reveals a passageway. Darga, a stair or ladder, is called darga in Aramaic. Marava derech gag, and that stands for a passageway to the roof. Puriya, a bed is called a puriya. And that's because that is also Rashi Tevot, Amar Papa, Sheparin Verabin Aleha, that one fulfills be fruitful and multiply on the bed. So Peru Urvu, Puriya. Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, Af Anu Nomar, Ailonit Duchranit de la Yaleda. Also an etymology for the word Ailonit, which means a woman who is not developed and cannot have children. She's called that because, like an ayil, which is a ram, a male sheep, which cannot cannot bear children because it's a male, and so too this woman who's an Ailonit has a male. We saw in Yevamot also can have some male features, and she cannot bear children. And so we see lots of interesting etymologies and hints at different words. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen ve'amen.